Google Earth the hurricanes and see. Look for anything that has solid lines that is not natural. You know, in nature, it's really critical that you understand that when men make things, it's usually not in the pattern of nature. In other words, we're linear.
We'll be back with more with Stephen Quayle in just a moment. So here we are with Project Bluebeam. Once they start using this holographic look into the sky of false UFOs, what does it mean? What do they want? We'll talk with Stephen about that when we come back. So, Stephen, sooner than later, do you think they're going to flip this holographic light and we're going to see these objects all over the place?
Well, I think we're seeing them now, and I think that we're seeing the real. I think the projection comes at a later date. I think now we're seeing, when people are seeing TR3s, Tango Romeo 3 Bravos, or Tango Romeo 3 Charlies, those are the typical black, if you will, secret aircraft of the United States government, electrogravitic. Now, Standeo is...
Or the hidden government.
Or the hidden government, thank you. That's what I mean, the hidden government, as well as the hidden military. And what right now is impressive is that the Russians are even talking about bringing out a lot of their secret weapons. When we get to that, the thing that's fascinating, George, is that the technologies, especially the Tesla technology, that the Russians possess and have actually not only effectuated but absolutely gone beyond what most people in the West even can realize, and then coming into contact with our electrogravitic craft. Again, people think of aircraft in the U.S. military as fighter jets and bombers and transport aircraft, but there's a whole division in the secret government that exists that has stuff that, as I've been told by many of the people have talked to me, and as you've interviewed so many people over the years on talk radio, this stuff is so far advanced and so far in the future that we're talking about stuff that absolutely can cloak invisibility. Remember, we used to talk about that, and people say, "Oh, they can't do that." Now, all the stories are coming about and out that invisibility is no big deal anymore. We've got stuff that basically, and it's my contention based on what I've been told, that we have gone so much further into outer space and into our galaxy than most people can even believe. Because, again, I believe that we are in the Matrix, that we are dealing with contemporary propulsion, contemporary aircraft, and the space shuttle and all that. That's a lot for show, okay?
Well, with this faked invasion, what do they want to accomplish, Stephen?
Total world control and domination.
So we'll panic, probably. That's what they expect.
Absolutely.
They'll say we've got to spend more resources into military might, and we've got to do all these things, and we're in control now. We've got to shut these sectors down. Maybe you can't stay out late, and off they go.
Well, right, and I think the thing that people need to realize is that there's a seen world that we deal with, but the invisible world, once CERN and some of these other systems are fully integrated, then the invisible world becomes visible, because basically you're dealing with invisibility in one realm. You're bending light rays. You're absolutely able to change the molecular structure of different items that are material. But the point is, again, going back to even the Apostle Paul said, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, spiritual wickedness in heavenly places." Well, we're talking about the heavens, okay? And we're talking about the prophetic time zone we live in, where there's going to be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. The very powers of heaven are going to be shaken. When it talks about the powers of heaven, those are actual entities, George. Those aren't like lightning and thunder and all that stuff, because they're identified in, if you will, the hierarchy of the angelic realm. You're talking about stuff up in the, again, you get into that angelic realm. And again, when I speak of angels, I'm not talking about little fat-faced cherubs that people put on their mantelpiece, made of porcelain,
That's true.
I mean, so we're talking about global control. So obviously we're going to have to yield something. And what is the New World Order saying? That the day of nation states is over. We're going to be one giant hug fest. But before you have one giant hug fest, you have to have such a transformation of the existing national structures, and you have to have a change of thinking. Obviously, if you're the devil or his minions, and I believe in a literal devil, I believe in there are good angels and fallen angels. And fallen angels, let me explain this to people, because this is the most confusing thing I think that 90% of the people in the world that contact me is God created specific realms and barriers for these entities to stay in. When they left that realm, if you will, heaven, and they took on themselves the physicality of man, messed with the creation, everything God did in Genesis, he said, after its likeness and kind, and saw that it was good. Now with the transgenic and the realm of combining animal, human DNA, human alien DNA, I maintain, as you know, we've done shows in the past where the Human Genome Project is looking more for non-human genomes, in other words, genetic material that exists out of the human genetic structure, than it is looking at what makes the Icelanders different than the Norwegians or different than the American Indians,
right.
Native Americans. So when you're talking about this, it's fascinating that you get right back to the very thing that we're being told. Now, tying it in with aliens, isn't it fascinating that in all the years that you've been studying abductions and talk to people, it's always the genetic manipulation of human reproductive processes or substances that basically seems to fascinate you. I tell people, aliens don't basically live in a world where they have to show up on Earth to have sex after traveling 4.5 million light years, for a good time, And I mean, that's almost what some people believe. I've been told that, literally, with people with a straight face, and I said, trust me, if you've got that kind of technology, that's not the reason. So the point is that we're talking about the days that, if the days weren't shortened, that means if all this event or these events that we're speaking about weren't compressed, Jesus said there'd be no flesh left alive. If you allow transgenesis to go on, in other words, crossing animal and human DNA, and when you and I first started talking about that, you probably couldn't find 2 stories a week on the net about it. Now you can't.
They're all over the place.
They're all over the place. So, and the bioethicists, I love that, especially the alien ones that have lizard eyes that are saying, oh, we see nothing wrong with it. you basically want to say, will you take off your human suit and show your scales, please,
So what can we do about this, Stephen, if it is indeed going to be a faked alien invasion?
Well, I think what you and I are disarming the fear factor. If people understand it and know ahead of time. That's why I've done everything I've done, George. You mentioned the book I'm bringing out. The book, it just got proofread, by the way, and it's important to bring this out. Long Walkers, so people understand, is a Special Operation Command's name. I didn't name them that. They name them that for the giants and the genetically altered, if you will, species that are out there.
And it's more of a novel, but there's a lot of truth behind it.
Right, and I got to tell you something. I have a wonderful, my strong suit is not fiction. Duncan Long is one of the great fiction writers. Duncan's a very brilliant man, and so what we did is we took my movie script, okay? I went to 2 of the biggest studios. They said, we can't do this for 2 years because we're committed to all these projects.
Right.
And, I mean, even Steven Spielberg now has gone to India to get money to fund his projects. But to make a long story short, I said, I'm going to put everything I know about this stuff into a novel form, in a fictional novel form. I don't write fiction. So we basically, you and I have spoken about the Egyptian finds in the Grand Canyon that were carried in the Phoenix Gazette at the turn of the century. Professor Kincaid, which the Smithsonian denies. And most people don't understand in the United States that what I always get is, well, where are all the skeletons if these things exist? Well, basically, they end up in crates at Area 51 or S4.
How big are these giants, Stephen?
The ones that are currently alive, I'm talking not only bones, I'm talking alive, 12, even some as tall as 14 feet.
And in biblical days, they were about the same height?
Yep.
Okay.
And some of them were, King of Bashan was 18 feet tall.
Jeez.
And see, so the thing is that you and I have spoken of the cultures around the world. Every single